What is Bealtaine, and what are the practices of Irish people at that time of year? Well, Dagdy Agus Fáilte. Hi, hello and welcome. Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School here. And Bealtaine is May. It's still the Irish word for the month of May, the entire month of May, but a lot of people only acknowledge it on May Day, which is the very 1st of May, and follow many cultural traditions from May Eve, which is the last day of April, of course. Bealtaine is one of the main four festivals of the Irish year, really. So it's Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and then Samhain, and then we loop right through back around. But Bealtaine being May Day in Ireland is different to what people think of when they think of May Day celebrations. It brings up the mind of maypoles and other kind of experiences, Morris dancing, etc. And though those things are important, they're not Irish. They're of a different culture. They are English or different parts of cultures within the island of Britain, but they're not Irish. But what is Irish, and how can we connect you with reference sources? How can we point to the information and cite our sources to build for you a better picture of what Bealtaine is in Ireland? And that's the purpose of this video. So there's a couple of different things to really touch on. As I said, it's Bealtaine marked the beginning of summer. It was the time of year when everything began to ramp up and get warmer. So Imbolc will be your time for preparing. You'll be digging and laying everything out, planting some particular seeds. In fact, Bealtaine was so important that if you didn't have your tilling and your digging done before Bealtaine, you're on the back foot for the entire year. So Bealtaine is you're ready, you're getting your seeds in the ground, you're preparing for the warm period in Ireland and the growth and the energy that's going to come from that. So that does mean that there's a lot of risk at that particular time. There's a lot of danger if you're not looking after your abundance and looking after your property very well. From a growing point of view, you'd have to have your tilling and everything done so that you're sowing it before and on the May period to ensure that you get your full growth before harvest when Lunasa rocks around. But if also you've been keeping cattle, you'll be keeping cattle in with byres or barns, etc. over winter periods, Bealtaine will be the time of the year when, enough grass is growing outside and you'll be taking your cattle out and maybe allowing them exterior grazing if you have the land, or they'd be going up into the mountains with, it was called a bulla. It was when the herds would be taken into the high pastures and young people would be sent off to guard the herds when they're away from home. So culturally speaking, it was a very important time for the opportunities to grow and to care and to also express your independence to a certain degree, because you'd be away from home up in the mountains minding the cattle and with a whole lot of other young people. I'll loop back to that. But May was very important for those transition, that shift, that change in practices. And that, of course, informed the culture and the acknowledgements of the culture as we go through that. It was also marked as the half point of the year. And so any rents or dues or levies that were due would be collected around the May Day period as well, around Bealtaine. And so you'd have to have your 6 months saved up, and you'd have to have it ready for your landlord to come knocking. And so we have records of information. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm checking my sources, because I'm not going to give you spoof here. I'm going to cite my sources everywhere. But there's Privy Council from 1576, which is listed specifically May Day. Commonly, the Irish captains and lords used to bargain and compound with their tenants. So it would be a time of negotiation. It would be a time of paying what you're due for your 6 months. And if there was any other negotiation that had to be done for changing levy, changing tenancy, we have a tenancy challenge, a housing crisis here in Ireland at the moment. So this is interesting, maybe getting more in line with the energy of renegotiating and making sure we stand up for ourselves would be less exposed to the negative impacts of landlords. But I'm going to risk getting onto a rant. And so if you'd like me to rant about the significances of social activism and how we can use the energies of our cycles and the cultural influences of ancient Irish practices now in a modern era, let me know in a comment. And we can definitely look at that and get you some sources. There was a lot of fairs or féiles or gatherings around Bealtaine because it was a time for people to show their labor, to bring out the work that they can do. We're now coming out of that winter and that preparation phase. So People would go to work fairs, job fairs. You turn up and say, okay, here's your skill. Here's what you have. You're a laborer. You're a weaver. You're good at animal husbandry and caring. And so you would then go to these trades and go to these fairs and events where you would look for your jobs and see if you can get someone to hire you for a period of time. It was quite common back in the day for there to be like a year and a day contract. And so you'd get your contract in May, you'd then work your year, and then by the time the next Bealtaine festival comes back around, you've completed your contract. And either you'll be renewed where you are with the person who hired you last year, or you'd move on and see if you can get work with someone else for that period of time. So there was a lot of movement. There was a lot of kind of shifts and transformations and changes, culturally speaking, in Ireland at the time of Bealtaine. And it's not just a May Day festival, it's the entire period of that month as things begin to change and begin to move. One of the interesting things is the fact that there was a lot of recognition for agricultural elements. And if you were keeping good with managing your property well and managing your cattle well, this would be the time when you'd be able to see that. You'd be able to check your records and say, okay, I did manage it well. I did get it right. I actually have another reference here. I'll give you that. So it is from Danaher, I'll put a link with the resources in the content below. But it was said then, yeah, absolutely. A spring, all your tilling would have to be done and should be finished by May Day. Then turf cutting could begin. You wouldn't be cutting turf before Bealtaine. And then to have hay still left over in your haggard at May Day was a sign of good husbandry. So this means that you not only planned properly for last year Bealtaine, for Lunasa, for your harvest to get it in, but then also you maintained your stores throughout the period of Samhain, the dark times across Imbolg. So by the time you hit Bealtaine and you're bringing your cattle out and you're going to be sending them outside grazing and you had hay left over, that meant you got it right. You did a good job. And so that energy, that awareness of look at where you were before you begin to ramp up into the next season's worth of growth. It was a time for those recognitions as well. So like the people themselves, as I said, there would be a lot of fairs, Bealtaine fairs, people would be gathering. Some relationships would be formed as well. Bealtaine was the time for a year and a day marriage. Some people might come together, as I said, at a Bealtaine fair and be like, okay, let's see if this is going to work out as a relationship. And so they would choose to then be a couple for a year and a day, knowing that they would live together, they'd share the labours, they'd share the efforts, and then come the next Bealtaine, they decided to want to carry on, or if they just part, in which case people would be looking for a new partner come around May Day time. And that then also is that energy of people growing into themselves and growing up. If some people are going to be youth, are going off into the pastures. Some people may have been doing that work for their family for previous times. May would when they would be looking for partnership themselves to grow into the next part of their life. And so there was a lot of importance around that. Where other cultures would have maypoles and expressions of sharing and dancing and courtship, we didn't have maypoles, but we did have may bushes. And they're very markedly different things because it wasn't just one communal area where people would gather for an event. Each person, each household would harvest a piece of a local bush, a greening bush, a bush that has come into life and is now leafing. They would take a branch of that and they'd put it in their front yard, outside of their home, outside of their property. So just on the boundaries and on the edges. And then that would be decorated either with eggs that they'd kept over from Easter time in later or older times. It would be with yellow flowers being very important. And the cultural significance of that is that it was protection magic. It was said that the other crowd, the Dini Ma, would not be able to cross a boundary of yellow flowers. And it's something that we do here and have every year. So you would gather your yellow flowers last day of April. So again, if you want to engage in this practice, here's a mini practice for yourself you can do. On the last day of April, May Day Eve, gather your yellow flowers. And then make sure before the sun comes up on May Day that they are placed outside on a boundary of your property, be it a doorstep, a windowsill, the edge of your garden land, anything like that at all. So gather yellow flowers and place them on your boundary. Any yellow flowers, like it could be dandelions, primroses, buttercups, whatever the yellow flower is, because that it was the significance of those being the first blooming flowers in Ireland at that time. But that was the significance and that was the importance. So if you wanted to straight away pick up a mini practice for yourself You could honour the ancient Irish ancestry of magical protection and cultural protection from the other crowd by placing yellow flowers on your thresholds. But that links back to the May bush as well. This bush being placed outside, decorated with yellow flowers, is a sign of renewed faith and renewed growth, because it is, again, a first leafing bush from that year coming out of Impulk. Even now, the trees are coming into leaf here, and I love every one of them. I was walking around with the grandkids not long ago, and I was like, oh, look, the trees are awake now. How can you tell? There's leaves coming up. And so I said that to my granddaughter, and she's, hello, tree, good morning, tree. So she started wishing every tree that had leaves on it good morning. And I didn't know if she got it until she went, look. And she pointed at a tree that didn't have leaves and went, that one's still asleep. And I was like, yes, you absolutely got it. But it's that energy of new growth, new life, and how that abundance is notable and visible now in the world at Bealtaine. And so taking a bush, taking this branch and placing it outside, showing the new growth, was very important to attracting that abundance in. But also, because it's a time of abundance, a time of transformation and change, there was risk. There was risk for making sure you're protecting what is yours, what is your abundance, and not having it taken or stolen from you by someone else. Specifically on May Day, if someone comes looking for a light on May Day, the answer should be a respectful and polite no. Now, quite commonly in Ireland, like, you'd be wandering around and someone like, here, you got a light or whatever like that and all. And Irish people are very charitable. We're very caring, passionate. Yeah, we'd absolutely help out a neighbour wherever we can, except on May Day. And so the culture was that if someone were to ask you for a light of your fire on May Day, they're not just, getting a light, they're getting access to what generates your abundance and energy for the rest of the year. And so culturally speaking, there'll be no spending, no lending, no borrowing, no nothing on May Day specifically. So it's something we do here ourselves as well. Midnight on the last day of April, right the way through till afternoon, if not later on into the evening of May Day. No lending, no borrowing, no spending. And it's a way of focusing on, again, as I said earlier on, that creation of abundance within your household, looking at how well you've managed your abundance through the leaner or darker time of the year, just before you get into the next stage of ramping up, growing and investing for hopefully your harvest come Lunasa. So it was very important to protect that. So people could and would go around. In fact, it was noted so much so that a particular individual coming around to your home and asking should be treated with suspicion. Even if they wanted to borrow something that's white, because white is the colour of milk. And so borrowing a cup of milk on May Day would be accessing your butter or your dairy for the rest of the year. And so that was very important for many households, because Ireland at the time was very much agricultural. And actually, interestingly enough, within the household, the products of the cattle was generally the woman's property. So the man might own the cattle or might own the land, but what the cattle gave, the milk and the dairy, was the woman's. And so many women would be churning and creating butter and then selling butters and cheeses, because that was their own way they would generate wealth within their self and within their family unit. And if you were losing that dairy, it wasn't just, okay, someone else's. No, it was very significant, because that's what you would be selling come market day at a May Day fair, for example. Bealtaine are very important, very crucially important for our protection. And this is where the bonfire element comes in as well. You'd be taking your cattle out, as I said, very important, very crucial wealth and abundance and stability for your family. But they would have been in winter keeping. And so they would be taken out before they moved to the pastures. There would be bonfires. And the bonfires weren't just family gatherings or, here, let's have a nice day out and a good fire. It was intentionally designed to help clear, purge anything that's been carried over through the winter, a sickness, illness, malaise, anything like that at all. But then also to secure abundance and growth before the next stage goes in. So we have stories of a communal bonfire that people would take part of the bonfire home. They then use the embers around their home or around their fields where they're going to be doing their growing to ensure abundance. And again, that's where a communal bonfire was made. You wouldn't be taking your fire from someone else's fire. You'd be taking it from this shared community energy if you're doing it right. But then also there's records of two bonfires being made and cattle being driven between those bonfires, or embers and smoke being cleansed over those. Not in some kind of, we're going to clear the energies of the woo of it all. It was intentional, because smoke would kill any insects that have been on or any parasites that have grown on your cattle before you send them up into the mountains to be looked after or to graze as they go. So the importance of driving cattle through bonfires, as in two bonfires, not through the middle of a bonfire, was cleansing and protection, but it was also very smart, like scientifically speaking, too. But the energy and investment of I have cleansed, I've prepared, warming up your cattle before they go off, and then protecting them through light and energy for them coming back was very culturally significant at this particular time, which is why bonfires at May Day is still very important in Irish culture now. Talking about sickness and the fires being used to clean and to heal sickness within cattle, there was also May Day morning. The dew from the morning just before the sun comes up on May Day itself was said to have healing properties. You could use it to get barefoot out on the dew. It would help with foot ache, sores, like any kind of joint pain within your feet. It would also help treat bunions and corns or hardness of your skin. It was also a beauty treatment. So you would gather the water from the first dew that is collected and you would rub that into your face, but you wouldn't dry it off. You'd wash your face and let that seep into your skin to collect the abundance. And in fact, there's records of not all dew is the same. If you can actually gather your dew from corn or wheat or herbs that you've been growing, that's going to be more impactful for your health and for your sustaining abilities, rather than just dew from the grass outside or on the edges. And so there was a lot of importance. In fact, sometimes the dew would be gathered on like linen cloths and then collected, and then that would be held in a glass bottle as a treatment throughout the year for skin ailments or pains or aches. So there was a lot of very important treatment beliefs and cultural beliefs around the May Day morning dew. So if it was part of your beauty regimen and treatment, yes, absolutely. But it wasn't just, oh, you'll be fair of face. It was actually also to treat skin treatments and to keep you settled. Another thing about water. Yeah, there's a lot of wells around Ireland. Many of them are listed as holy wells nowadays because sure, put a bit of Mary and Jesus on it and it's a holy well. But many of them are actually still listed in our older manuscripts of locations of places for treatment, places for care, which is probably why the church put stuff on top of them rather than removing them. But some local wells, it was believed that on May Day morning, the first water that came out of the first arrival, first person to get a bucket of water, that first water that came May Day morning was imbued with the same level of healing, power, abundance that the dew would actually be. And so we have records in our culture, in our mythology, and in our folklore of people hanging out at wells on April evening to see if they could be the one to get the first bucket of water. And so much so that there's also records of pumps, local village pumps being chained up on April night just to make sure that no one's kind of skying the first bucket of water. So it's not just, sure, it's all quaint belief and it's all just like, sure, look, aren't they just whatever they be believing in? So much of what has been talked about right the way back to our medieval times. In fact, some of the oldest Bealtaine records can be dated to a document known as the Seanchai Cormac, or Cormac's Glossary, which we can linguistically date to 900 Common Era, which then talk about the bonfires, talking about the driving your cattle between the fires. So this isn't just quaint folklore. This is long held in multi-generational belief and practices that are there to secure your abundance, your care, your survivability. So much so that it was said that if you were ill or you were unwell, as long as you got better by Bealtaine, you weren't going to die that year. You were going to be grand. But if you got sick on Bealtaine or after Bealtaine, then wasn't looking good for you. But whether or not that's down to just mystical belief or superstition, or whether it's down to if you were going to get sick, it would have been at the lean times when you weren't able to get the sunlight on you, when you weren't able to get fresh food grown in your ground, when you had to survive on your supplies. There's a lot of different ways to go deeper beyond what is the fictitious beliefs that some people present as the mystical, magical Bealtaine. It is rich, it is magical, it is powerful. There's a lot to understand and to grow from as we work within a Bealtaine practice. But it's not just flights of fancy. It's real, it's practical, it's grounded in our culture, our history, and the living traditions of the Irish people on Ireland. So hopefully this has been interesting to you and not too much of a John rants about a number of things that he finds inspirational about Bealtaine. I may have to get out and get some early morning Bealtaine dew for my mug this year and try and keep myself pretty and beautiful. But we'll see how it goes, and how I know for sure there will be yellow flowers on our threshold April evening. So if you would like to know more about Bealtaine traditions, something you might be able to pick up and do for yourself, all you got to do is go to irishpagan.school/Bealtaine. So that's irishpagan.school/BEALTAINE. We have a checklist of resources. I'll include links to all these historical, fascinating documents as well, wherever we can, because we want to cite our sources. We want to connect you with not just Jon said it, it's also here's where you can find and check the information yourself. Duca Study is a great resource, but we'll give you a list of other resources as well, so you can dive deeper if you are interested. So until next time, maybe think about Bealtaine being not too far around the corner and what you're going to do for yourself. And until then, slán and goodbye.